Welcome everyone to the 5011th meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago, the world's first service club. And this is, by the way, the first virtual meeting of our regular meeting. So it's a first as well as one in a very long line of meetings. I wanted to start out with a Rotary moment at a recent district meeting. The question was asked whether a Rotary convention had ever been canceled before. And the answer to that question is no. That in 1918, 1919, and 1920, during the Spanish flu pandemic, Rotary still conducted its conventions. It was much smaller, only about 150 people. And in fact, at the tail end of that pandemic in 1921 is when it went international. So the 1918 convention was in Kansas City, and in 1919, I believe it was in San Francisco. So that's the answer to the trivia question. For the thought for the day today, we're going to have Marga give the thought for the day, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a project. I'm going to kind of tell you how this virtual meeting is going to unfold, because there are some things that I'd like you to know so the meeting goes smoothly and we can engage as a club. But let's start with the thought for the day. Marga?
Hello, everybody. I would like to give a quick welcome to those who speak Spanish, Celia, Guillermo, Paula, and I'll go ahead with the thought of the day in English. Marshall, thank you for sharing that as well. These are words written by Kitty O'Meara, who she composed in 1869 during the Great Irish Famine. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently. And the people healed, and in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth.
Thanks for sharing, Marga. That was nice.
Let me give you a few tips for this meeting, and the first one deals with mute. We have a very distinguished speaker today, Harry Kraemer, who I will introduce in a moment. But when we do questions with Harry, we're going to do it in a slightly different form, which is everyone will be muted except for him during the meeting. If during the question period you want to speak, you can press the space bar and you will be unmuted as long as the space bar is depressed. It's a very convenient way to do this because you're automatically remuted. And if you get in the habit of pressing the space bar whenever you want to talk, it makes for a much smoother meeting because you don't get echoes from everyone who's unmuted. So I will keep most people muted and try to keep yourself muted except when you hit the space bar. We're going to do the meeting slightly differently than normal. There are going to be a few new features because we don't have a meal to eat. And we'll have just a little bit more time, but I won't keep you too late so that you can actually have a meal after we're done. I wanted to start the meeting by showing you all a picture of our COVID project. So through a collaboration of Eric Kempel, our president-elect, Marilyn Lopez, and others, Lita Williams, we have been providing meals for healthcare workers and some first responders in and around Chicago. And if I can get this right, This is a picture of our member, Sarah Buck, who helped organize, can you all see that? Who helped organize the delivery of some of the meals to the first responders who are using the Essex House as a place of respite. We've also delivered meals to Stroger, the Cook County Hospital, as well as to Rush. And we're scheduled to deliver meals to St. Mary's, St. Joseph's, and Masonic hospitals. And we're also exploring delivering meals to UIC. So we'll talk about that later, but I wanted to give you some inspiration. The meals that are there are very inexpensive. And hopefully we're going to be able to provide a lot of these meals to a lot of people. They have the Rotary 4-way test on them with a thank you for fighting on the front line. And we're calling the program Meals to the Front Line. So you should all be very proud. These are the things that that your club is doing to deal with the pandemic. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Harry Kraemer from the Kellogg School of Management. Harry M. Jansen Kraemer is an executive partner with Madison Dearborn Partners, a private equity firm based in Chicago, and he's a clinical professor of leadership at the Northwestern Kellogg School of Management. He was the 2008 Kellogg School Professor of the Year, and he's former chairman and chief executive officer of Baxter International. He had a very long career at Baxter, and Harry's an example of what happens when you work at a company for an extended period of time and rise through the ranks. He started as director of corporate development and ended up as CEO and chairman of the board. Harry serves on a lot of different organizations, most notably the Board of Trustees of Northwestern University. He's a member of several of the business clubs in Chicago. Unfortunately, not Rotary. We'd like to get him into the Rotary Club of Chicago. He lives in Wilmette with his wife, Julie, and their 5 children. Today, he comes to us from Sarasota, Florida, where he is hunkered down because of the COVID crisis. Harry, thank you very much for coming and speaking to us today, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to be with all of you. It'd be greater if we were all together and having a meal, but this amazing to how well the technology can work. So, and as Marshall said, I really prefer to have more of a dialogue than a monologue. So you can hit the space bar at any time. You don't have to wait for me to talk for a while. Feel free, and we can have a good discussion. I had one of my Kellogg classes last night, and I had 127 people on it, and I had 127 little pictures. And then everybody, times they hit the space bar, you can see the person and they can ask questions. So I would much prefer to do that. So please jump in, hit the space bar. I always mention in talks that right up front, I have very, very few answers, very, very few answers. But like everybody on this call, I have a lot of opinions. So I don't do Q&A, question and answer. I do a lot of Q&O, question and opinion, and more than happy to share my opinions. The thought here is to talk a little bit about leadership, particularly in crisis situations. And I'll give you a couple of thoughts on this. But just to put it in perspective, when I had the opportunity to come back to Kellogg, I always say I went to Kellogg, to Northwestern. I always say it was a few years ago, and my wife Julie says, no, it was 40 years ago. And I say, Julie, it was 40 years ago for you. We were there together. Okay, that ends that discussion because we have 5 children. She likes to tell our 5 children she's 35 years old. This is becoming really complicated because our oldest daughter is 32 and just graduated from Northwestern. So I ended up working at Baxter for many years. But one of my professors at Northwestern was Dean Jacobs, that some of you may be familiar with. One of the buildings is named after him. He was an amazing professor and then the dean for 25 years at Northwestern at the Kellogg Business School. So when I was leaving Baxter, the day it was announced I was leaving Baxter, he called me and he said, "Oh, this is fantastic. Thank goodness you're finally leaving Baxter." I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Well, because I want you to teach." And I said, "Dean Jacobs, you don't mean like have a syllabus, grade paper. That's not happening. I run companies." He said, "I think you said you would do whatever I told you to do." Well, being a little deferential toward my professors, I said, "Yeah, I did say that." So I've been teaching at Kellogg now for the past 12 years. He thought I was going to do finance because I had majored in finance and had a CPA and was the chief financial officer. But I said, "Hey, Kellogg has got all these brilliant PhDs. I got an MBA. I can't compete with these people." And he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, I would like to focus on leadership, value, and ethics. I said, I've been on a lot of boards. I really, really do believe we live in a world where we need more value-based leaders. Of course, that was true 12 years ago. The demand and need for it now is exponential compared to what it was 12 years ago. And he said, "Well, that's fine. You can teach leadership, but you better get a syllabus together because you start in 2 weeks." So I spent 2 weeks in the Northwestern Library reading all the articles I was supposed to read when I was a student, but I never got around to it. But I read them this time. And so I've been teaching, and my whole focus is really on, and I almost have like a calling for, how do we really develop the next generation of value-based leaders? Not ego, not macho, not the smartest person in the room, but people who have strong values, high integrity, and their whole focus is how do we develop people to their full potential and make a difference. And so that's what my focus is at Kellogg and on being on 10 boards that I serve, mostly healthcare companies. So with that said, when we talk about a crisis, I get asked a lot, and I remember I said opinion, so jump in. People say, "Well, geez, how do you deal with a crisis when it happens? Whether it's, you lose people, there's a fire, or the major crisis that we're in now." And maybe a little surprise to people, I always say, I don't think leaders wait until you're in a crisis, because any leader, and I'm sure any of you on the screen here know that it's not a question of if there's going to be a crisis, it's only a question of when. And when you realize there are going to be crises, you got two choices. You can do nothing and be really surprised until it starts, or you can plan of how you're going to react in a crisis. And the way I describe it is, it comes down to, are you as a leader somebody who can lead yourself? Because as many of you know, when people talk about leadership, very often they talk about leading others, influencing others, and so on. Not that that's not important, but one of the key things, Marshall, I always point out is, I don't think it's possible, I truly don't think it's possible to lead other people if you can't lead yourself. So my perspective is, we're all busy, we've all got a lot to go doing, and as we get busier and busier, I think many people confuse activity and productivity. We're very, very active. It's amazing how active we are. We're running around, but how productive are we, right? Or are we running around so much, we don't know how productive we are. Let's just keep moving. And I think a person who's a value-based leader literally takes the time to turn off the noise, get off by themselves, and actually ask some, I think, fairly significant personal questions. What are my values? What's my purpose? What really matters? The short term I'm on this earth, what difference do I really want to make? Is it just success, or is it significance? Is it, my resume, or is it the legacy that I leave? And I don't know how you can deal with those questions when you're running around like crazy, but spending a little bit of time thinking about that helps you lead yourself. And if you can lead yourself, I think you can start to lead other people. And then that leads to this discussion of a crisis. And often people will say to me, "Well, geez, I don't know how to deal with the crisis." And I say, "Well, here's an idea. Why don't you just sit back and ask yourself, when things are going well, right now we're in the middle of one, but before this happened, I always ask myself, as a leader, as a father, mother, spouse, whatever your roles are, what are you going to do when there's a crisis? What are you going to do?" And having thought about this a lot the last 30 years, and now teaching it, I realize that there's really only two things I have to do when there's a crisis. two things. The first thing I have to do, with a lot of people's help, is we're going to try to do the right thing. Now, when you say you're going to do the right thing, that makes one enormous assumption. What's the right thing? Well, I'm certainly not bright enough to figure that out by myself, so I better surround myself with some value-based people. Maybe it's colleagues that you have at Rotary, maybe it's people at Baxter or Kellogg or whatever. I better find some people who can work with me in an uncertain world to figure out what is the right thing to do. And the second thing is, I will do the best we can do. And again, I usually talk about this in a 3 or 4 hour lecture, so I'm giving you the Cliff Note version. But if you can decide that no matter what happens tomorrow, and I mean no matter what happens tomorrow, I already know what I'll do, Marshall. I'll try to do the right thing. I'll do the best I can do. I'll try to do the right thing. I'll do the best I can do. Because if we're honest about it, there's a series of things that everybody on this call deals with more than they wish they did, and it's a little hard to deal with, a little hard to admit. And I put them under the buckets of worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and let's not forget about stress, just to name 5. Now, the whole issue with worry, fear, stress, pressure is when it starts, it's almost too late, right? Because if I say to Marshall, hey, Marshall, don't worry about it, but he's already worried, it's too late. But why would you wait? So this whole perspective of, hey, when things are going well, what am I going to do when things are going well, by the way? Because we all go through periods of ups and downs, right? Well, when things are going really well, I said to myself, 2 things we're going to do. One, we'll celebrate, we'll have gratitude, we'll thank every single person involved. That's what we're going to do when things are going well. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to ask ourselves, what will we do, not if, when things go down? And so, and by the way, this may sound a little morbid, but here's how serious I take this. So right now it's Tuesday. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. But for me, I think the worst case for me personally tomorrow would be something happens to my wife, Julie, or something happens to one of the 5 children. I hope it doesn't happen. I'll pray it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, I do know what I'll do. I'll try to do the right thing. I'll do the best I can do. And what that ends up doing is that will significantly reduce worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress. It won't eliminate them. Welcome to the real world, so it's going to exist. And we've all had bosses that would say, you know, hey, a little bit of pressure, Shelby, isn't all bad. The problem is we have a lot more than a little bit. So this ability to put things into perspective has an enormous impact. And again, we could talk about this for hours because that ability to put things into perspective, you know, it's people would say to me at Baxter, they'd say, boy, Harry, you know, you got 55,000 people, you're in 103 countries, you have these old issues. Harry, what keeps you awake at night? I used to say to people, by the time I go to sleep, nothing keeps me awake. And if it takes me more than 5 minutes to go to sleep, I'll read another book on Churchill or FDR. I don't have a whole lot of time for worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress. But unless you actually are self-reflective enough to ask those questions, what are my values? What's my purpose? What really matters? It's very, very difficult in my mind to lead others. So that's one part. The other part, before we just open this up, because I really want to have a good dialogue, is that when, again, not if, when the crisis starts, there's a lot of discussion, and I've had a lot of discussions on 3 Zoom calls earlier today on, all right, well, how do I deal with things when it happens now? And boy, there's a lot of things I don't know, and people are asking me a lot of questions. Here's a very simple, because by the way, I keep everything simple so I don't confuse myself. So here's a very, very simple formula, I think, for dealing when you're in a crisis. 3 parts. Part 1, and I'll just pretend we're all out. Number 1, I will tell people what we know. They will be factual. It will not be guesses. It will not be what I think you want to hear. It's not going to be false news. It's going to be, here's what we know. And we'll get a lot of people help who are value-based, who we trust, whose opinions matter. But number 1, we'll let people know what we know. Number 2, we will openly and honestly admit what we don't know, because there's going to be a lot of things that we don't know. And I think showing vulnerability, showing and having honesty of what you know, what you don't know, will help a lot. So number 1, we'll let people know what we know and why. Number two, we'll let people what we don't know. Number three, we'll let people know how quickly we'll get back to them with what we didn't know in number two, because we're going to get smarter. We're going to learn a little bit more, all right? And what that breeds in my mind is integrity, trust, relationships, and that's exactly what you want to do. And communication, as you all know, is a critical part of this. I always tell executives that when things are going well, communication is important. When things are not going well, communication is 3 times more important, right? Because people are always going to assume it's a lot worse than it really is. And so that ability to build trust, you know, if Margaret asks me a question, to say, hey, Margaret, you know what? I don't know, but I'll tell you what. How fast do you need to know? I'll find an answer for you. I'll let you know. And I'll let you know how quickly we'll get back to you. It has an enormous impact in my mind on your ability to lead other people. So that's a summary of a couple of thoughts. We can get real specific about what's going on right now, healthcare-wise, economics-wise, whatever. Or we can take this any way you like, because as I said, I have very few answers. I just have a lot of opinions. And by the way, Marshall, I could get rolling. Last night I did a 4-hour class without stopping, but you guys have got a lot going on. So I'm going to stop here, and hopefully people will start pressing the space bar, and we'll share some opinions. And by the way, on either things that I mentioned already, or, hey, Harry, you didn't bring this up, but here's one we ought to talk a little bit about. I'm more than open to taking any questions.
Well, Harry, let me start, because your presentation brings to mind, especially the first part of it, a lot of things that we tried to instill in our children. And it seems to me that the notion of doing the right thing and doing the best you can are 2 very simple principles that if children learn, they end up growing up as leaders. And so I guess my question to you as a father and as a professor, how do you go about instilling those 2 points in children?
Wow. Okay. So opinions, Marshall. I personally, I don't think anything is more important. There's a lot of important things in life. Okay. But other than your faith, I can't think of anything more important than establishing and building the values in your children, in supporting with your spouse, and everybody that you come in contact with. And in my mind, that requires a tremendous amount of actual time spent. Having meals, taking walks, being there, being on sounding board. And again, I always say opinions. When people would say to me, I get this a lot, I'm sure you folks do well, I'd love to spend more time with my children, but I don't have the time, so we don't spend quantity, we spend quality. Well, Julie, being a great sounding board, always said, Harry, our children don't even know how to spell quality. You're either there or you're not there, okay? And if you want to rationalize you're not going to be there, then don't be surprised. Don't be surprised that the things happen that happen. So in my mind, it's constant reinforcing from a very young age. You know, what are your values? What is your purpose? What really matters? And really taking the time to reinforce that. I was very fortunate because my parents believed that family was everything. They passed away a couple of years ago in their late 80s, but their whole focus was myself and my 5 siblings. And they had all kinds of tricks, Marshall, that I thought worked out very well. I mean, every night at dinner, my father would go around the table and he'd say, Harry, what did you do today? Joe, what did you do today? Marilyn, what did you do today? And we did that for an hour while we were having dinner. In fact, one student at Kellogg said to me, well, how big of an impact did that have? And I said, well, here's the story I remember to this day. I can remember, Marshall, like it was yesterday, getting out of school. And here's how old I am, because we went by the little grocery store, and this is back when they had penny candy. And a bunch of my buddies started, stealing this penny candy. And I remember thinking to myself, 1, I love candy, and 2, everybody else is doing it. But Marshall, the only reason I didn't do it was I couldn't figure out how I would explain to my dad this tonight. The idea of not telling him, that didn't even occur to me. That did not even occur to me because we told him everything that we did. And I think that kind of reinforcement from being very young has an enormous impact, right? And by the way, as you know, Marshall, it all starts with starts with the leadership. I always quote, I guess, what Andrew Carnegie, the steel industrialist, who said, the older I get, the less I listen to what people say, the more I watch what they do. So you'll see these parents, well, boy, my children just don't go to church or don't go to the synagogue. And you realize, well, wait a minute, you just dropped them off and you didn't go, and then you're wondering why they didn't? I always quote, Marshall, also Mark Twain. My very favorite Mark Twain quote is, he said, if you stop and think about it, he said, everything is common sense. The problem is that common sense is not common. Okay, somebody else got to hit the space bar here.
Yeah, ask a question. Oh, Go ahead, Ellen.
No, well, okay. My name's Ellen Harris. I have a question for you. Being in the former head of a big pharma company, such as Baxter, given what the environment is now in the healthcare industry, what's your perspective on how the corporate sector and the healthcare community can help and or support corporate social responsibility during this time? Wondering if you have any thoughts on that, because we're hearing about vaccines, that these rapid tests that Abbott's doing and things like that, but what are they doing to help the people really need, that don't have resources to those kinds of things, in partnership with like a public-private partnership, and what the role is of particularly healthcare industry in that?
Yeah, well, so great question. I mean, my view is, I think that, and I have a class on corporate responsibility, Ellen. We talk a lot about this. My view is, and a lot of my classes, I talk about the importance of balance. To me, everything is balance, right? Because sometimes you'll hear in interesting stories about companies. They'll say, well, should a company focus on its team members? I don't use the word employees. My team members, my customers, my suppliers, society as a whole, or my shareholders, people who own the company. And my comment is always, I think the answer is yes. It isn't one or the other. I think you have to be sensitive to all of them. And if you're going to have an organization that's going to be around for the long term, figuring out how you're going to be socially responsible, figuring out ways to significantly reduce the cost of what it takes to manufacture these products, and working with the government to be able to deliver them to every single person becomes paramount. But I think you have to be able to look at it the thing holistically. And healthcare, by the way, well, we could have a long talk about healthcare gets very complicated very quickly, because the more successful we are in coming up with drugs, in coming up with devices, prolonging life, which is fantastic, right? What's more important than increasing somebody's health and life? But the more successful you are, the more costly it is, and people don't realize that. So thinking through what percentage of the economy should we focus on health versus other things becomes a really a dialogue that truly needs to happen, because we now have the ability. Now we got to get through this crisis, and we will. And by the way, I'm a great believer that we will get through this. We will get through this, and maybe we'll be stronger as a result. We'll learn a lot, right? We'll learn a lot. I don't know how many of you saw it, but I do remember, if you ever watched these TED Talks, these TED TED Talks, or in fact, if you haven't seen it, what was it, about a week ago, Bill Gates did a TED Talk. You ought to see it. He talks about the fact that one of the big lessons of this, we will get through it, but one of the big lessons is we should have been much, much better prepared for this than we were. And in fact, I actually went back, Ellen, he actually gave a TED Talk in 2015. It's a 10-minute talk. You ought to listen to that, because he basically said in 2015, this is 5 years ago, that he's not was worried about nuclear war or what North Korea is going to do, because the next time several million people are going to die, it isn't going to be because of a nuclear bomb. It's going to be because of a pandemic. And
Yeah,
at the time
I
he said,
saw it, and I saw both of them, and he was spot on. Yeah.
he was spot on. Yeah. And so the fact, remember I mentioned before, one of the benefits, Ellen, one of the benefits of being self-reflective, of being prayerful, of literally thinking about these things ahead of time, is that it minimizes the surprise. See, because I think if you really thought through this, it's like, wait a minute, why were we surprised? Why don't we have tests available? Why don't we have masks available? I mean, this is not, 1825, it's 2020. All right, why are we surprised? And I hope that what all health institutions do, what the government does, everyone says, you know what, this will happen again. I mean, it is not a question that this will not happen again, but when we get through this, will we be better prepared the next time to go through it?
Thank you.
Harry, this is Wes Westerfield. I'm curious what you would do today as either chairman of Baxter or CFO of Baxter to prepare for what will happen, or you assume what will happen as we emerge from all this. And I'm also curious if you're still in touch with Gail Fossler.
Oh, wow. I haven't talked to Gail for a while. I mean, just probably the best economist I've ever known, and just a phenomenal person as well. I think what it needs to be in partnerships, Wes, that would be my opinion, that it comes down to Baxter, not by itself, but Baxter working with other medical companies, because we're more medical products than pharmaceuticals, but medical products, pharmaceuticals, hospitals, insurance companies, looking at the whole healthcare piece together and figuring out how can we be better prepared to get the tests prepared, the medical supplies prepared, and literally figure out a way. Wes, at the end of the day, I really believe what we have to do, and this gets a little philosophical, but I honestly believe what's got to happen. We have to figure out a way, Wes, to get from what we have today, which is really not healthcare, right? As you probably know, Wes, what we really have now is sick care. When you get sick, we have amazing ways of keeping you alive, as opposed to maybe we ought to move to healthcare. Maybe we ought to get away from the fact that 38% of the American population is obese. Okay, maybe we ought to have people say, I need to take more responsibility for my health care, and just encourage people in very proactive ways that they've got to exercise, they've got to eat right, because at the end of the day, Wes, we got a situation now where we are encouraging people that it doesn't matter what they do, we will take care of them. All right, simple things, Wes. I'll give you two examples that just drive me crazy. And I don't know if it's still there now. It may no longer be there. But I always found it fascinating when one of the institutions I would call on when I was at Baxter selling was the Cleveland Clinic, right? And which is one of the most famous heart clinics in the United States. And I always tease people, what's in the lobby, Wes? I don't know if it's still there, in the lobby of the Cleveland Clinic. What would be the most amazing thing to be in the lobby of the Cleveland Clinic, okay? How about a McDonald's, okay? Now, let's think about this. I come in for a triple bypass, and on the way out, I grab a couple of Big Macs as I'm leaving, okay? And then, Wes, how this has to change, how we need to take individuals and have them more responsible for their own health care. Here's the one that I just found that summed it up well. I was visiting my brother in Minnesota, and we go to Lifetime Fitness up there, right? And he said to me, boy, Harry, we've started something in Minnesota. I thought it was going to work out well, but it's got a strange way it's operating. So what's that? Well, several insurance companies, if you exercise, Wes, twice a week, and you get your card punched at your health clinic, health club, you get a 25% reduction in your cost. I said, so what's happening? So, well, Harry, let's walk in this. So we walked in, Wes, no exaggeration. There was a line of people coming into Lifetime Fitness. They got their card punched, and then they walked out. They didn't even exercise, okay? I mean, something is wrong here, Wes. At the end of the day, if healthcare is a free good and you don't take responsibility for your healthcare, the cost to the healthcare system will just continue to skyrocket. So I guess the way I look at it, Wes, somehow we've got to get from sick care to healthcare, I think. Somebody else has got to come off mute here.
Harry, it's Bob Westra. What are you suggesting your students read nowadays?
Well, I'm a little biased. For me, it's all related to value-based leadership, okay? So interestingly enough, I have two value-based leadership books. One is called From Values to Action. The other one is Becoming the Best. In fact, my students actually set up a website for me where I have a whole collection of other books, Authentic Leadership, written by Bill George, who was the CEO of Medtronic. Clayton Christensen wrote a book, who recently died, who was a professor at Harvard Business School, phenomenal guy. Clayton Christensen wrote a book on how to measure your life. My students actually set up a website for me. It's just called harrykraemer.org. Harry, Kraemer.org. And there's a whole series of articles and tapes on there that my students set up for me. But my whole focus really comes down to, as I said earlier, I've got to figure out how to lead myself, my trust, my authenticity. If I can figure that out, then I can lead other people.
Harry, we have a question from a visitor from Argentina. And the question is, what are the most important things that you've learned during the pandemic?
I would say, and this is going to sound a little strange, but nice to have a colleague from Argentina. I would say it's reinforced for me the things that I've been talking about for the last 10 years before this happened, which is, despite all of the negative side of an impact on business and everything else, it is giving people a moment, I think, to step back and ask themselves, what are my priorities? You know, am I now spending more time talking to my loved ones? Am I spending more time now talking to my siblings or people that I'm now taking a little bit of time? And maybe a lot of that rushing around, running around, grabbing another plane, how much of that was really activity as opposed to productivity? So I find this has given people, I hope, the reason to actually reassess again some of those big questions. You know, what are my values? What's my purpose? What matters? What difference do I want to make in the world at the short time I happen to be passing through? So as terrible as it is, and as terrible as the impact this has on particularly the less fortunate folks, it does in a strange way give people the opportunity to take a little bit of time to think about what really does matter and what doesn't matter.
I think we have time for one more, maybe.
Sure, Marga. What? Okay, Marga, you got to come off mute.
Yeah, I am. Okay, Harry, thank you very much for your thoughts and for expressing them in such a clear way. My question is, how do you navigate in this world of extreme polarity and diversity and aggressivity in ideas? It is very hard to know today what is true. I mean, you look at the networks and or especially cable TV, you know, they're exactly the same from different points of view. And you don't get news anymore. You get people shouting at you or experts that, you know, there's experts, you know, it's just very, well, at the end of the day, you don't know what is true, what are the real facts. So how do you navigate that?
Sure.
Yeah, that's my question.
Well, yeah, so Mark, this actually, it's amazing. This is actually one of my favorite questions because we talk a lot about this because I have several principles, okay? 4 principles. The first one's self-reflection that we've talked about. The second one is balance. And I talk about this a lot in that first book, From Values to Action. And the way I think about it, Marga, and you summarize it very well, what a value-based leader does is they have a balanced perspective. And what I mean by that, Marga, is they take the time to understand all sides of the story. And when I first started teaching, Marga, I made the mistake of saying the value-based leader takes the time to understand the other side. And one of these very bright students said, does that make the assumption there's only 2 sides? There's multiple sides to the story, right? And then I always quote St. Francis. I think St. Francis had a quote of what a value-based leader does is you seek to understand before you're understood. You seek to understand. So if I'm having a discussion with Wes I will never say, hey, Wes, I don't understand where you're coming from, because I think that's actually ignorant. If I take the time I can understand, then I'll decide, do I agree or disagree, right? So that ability to do that. Now, how do you do that? Well, from my perspective, I will never read the New York Times unless I also read the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and the Economist. You have to get all sides to this. And I stopped, believe it or not, I stopped watching television 30 years ago. I refused to watch television because the whole thing has become insane. I mean, it's difficult. In fact, I'll tell you a little story that, some people may disagree with, but, thank God, it's always opinions, right? So it's opinions. But for those of us that are a little older like myself, you may remember when we were growing up, the news was half an hour a night. It was Walter Cronkite. I think it was Huntley and Brinkley, okay? And the reason Walter Cronkite, at the end of the half an hour, by the way, there was 10 minutes of commercials, so he had 20 minutes, okay? And at the end of it, he always said, and that's the way it is, because that's the way it was. He just told you a fact. Now, what's happened? And my friends in media don't like me saying this, but let me describe the slippery slope that happened, okay? First of all, one group of people said, hey, you know what? We should make the news entertaining. Well, Walter Cronkite was a lot of things. The guy was not entertaining. Huntley and Brinkley was not entertaining, okay? So A, we're gonna make it entertaining. B, somebody said, hey, we wanna make money doing this, right? And by the way, it's a lot cheaper than having two guys talking with a microphone than cars blowing up. So why don't we make the news 24 hours? Now, I'm sure somebody said, but wait a minute. What if there's no news? Not a problem, not a problem. We'll invent the news, okay? And now again, for those of us a little older, back then, if John Kennedy said something or Lyndon Johnson said something, you heard it. And then you, as an intelligent adult, had to decide, okay, what do you think? Now, when a person says something, there's and now we turn to our panel of experts. Well, who are these people? I'm a senior analyst for XY. Who are these people, okay? And why do I care what they have to say? Because most of them aren't even that educated, okay? And so the final piece of it that I find remarkable is the extreme that you're talking about, Margaret. It's so extreme, it's almost crazy. Okay, last story I'll give you on this one. I don't watch television, right? So I get the only cars I've ever had are like Toyotas, right? So I get this new Toyota about I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago. And so I'm giving a speech downtown. I jump in my car. I just get this new car, and the radio's on. And all I heard the guy say was, it was the night that Hillary Clinton won the Democratic nomination. And the guy said, Hillary Clinton just gave a talk. That talk was the best talk I've ever heard. It reminded me of the Gettysburg Address. It was phenomenal. It was just really, and for some reason, I just wasn't in the mood. So I hit another button, and I must have been like Fox or something. And this guy said, that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Now, think about it. They're doing exactly what they want, right? Because if you want to make money, you want people to hear exactly what they want to hear. So if you're a right-wing whatever, you got your station. If you're a left-wing whatever, you got your station. So Margaret, these people never hear other sides of the story, which is why we're so unbelievably polarized, because the answer to everything is always in the middle, right? But if you're not willing to look at other perspectives, welcome to the world we're in. Not that I get emotional about this topic.
Thank you, Harry. We've got one more question. I wish we could go on for 3 hours, but Neetha has a quote. Our member Neetha has a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Marshall. So I really enjoyed the points that you've made, especially about the values and then the lifestyle also playing into the health. I wanted to know, as your perspective with Baxter, what are your thoughts also on, prevention type of things? I have been using our Ayurvedic Indian preventative things for building up immunity. So, I mean, any perspective on that, of how we can open up to different types of wellness and immunity building, preventative things in our diet too?
Yeah. So I'm not a physician, but let me put it this way: the healthcare people that I respect, and to Marcus, people that can literally look at all dimensions of this, and I do think there's a benefit of keeping it simple. I believe it starts with balance. So it's eating in moderation, it's getting exercise, it's taking care of yourself, all right? It's making sure that you get enough sleep, that you're outside getting fresh air, that you're eating a balanced way, and that you literally are not putting yourself under a tremendous amount of stress. And that's the benefit of self-reflection. Some people would call it prayer, meditation. But I think if you can keep things healthy. In fact, there's an article I'll send to Marshall, and he can pass it on to everybody. One of the articles I use in my classes, it's called The Corporate Athlete. And some of you may be familiar with it. It's a great article, and there's a book, because if you go back in time when all of you were younger and you were in sports, what did your coach tell you? All right, they probably told you, Neetha, you've got to exercise. You got to get rest. You have to eat right. Don't eat a lot of garbage. Make sure you're prepared. And the example he uses is that all of us now, no matter what we're doing in our life, this is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's the marathon that some of us have been on for 20, 30, 40 years, and some of us may like to be on it for another 10 years. All right? Well, if it's a marathon, he said, what do you have to do? And he talks about 4 dimensions in this article. You have to take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay, and that means different things to different people. And what I find, Neetha, if you can keep things in perspective, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, spend time with people who think that way, that are supportive, that can think of things in a balanced way, the way we're talking, Margaret, who literally can engage in a discussion as opposed to yelling at one another, screaming at one another, this insane, bipolar goings on. I think you'll live a much, much healthier life, and you'll be able to be around a lot longer, so you can influence your children, your grandchildren, and maybe your great-grandchildren. That's an opinion. That's an opinion.
Harry, I'm going to break my rule. Someone else had a question. Our longtime member, Jody Sandiford, wants to know, what do you envision the way we work will look like going forward after all this time spent working from home during the shutdown?
Wow. Well, let me think about that. Let me reflect on that for a minute. I think it was Yogi Bear who made the comment, predictions are very difficult, particularly about the future, okay? So I guess the way I think about this, and we can all kind of do this, is as we slow down and as we think about this, because it isn't when things get better, Marshall, what's going to change? I think a lot of people are going to ask themselves, how much of this running around that I've been doing do I really need to do? Do I need to fly to San Francisco for a 3-hour meeting, take a flight for 4 hours, check in a hotel? Or wait a minute, could I just get on one of these calls? All right. I mean, there's an awful lot of people, including me, by the way, Marshall. I was one of these guys. I admit this. Up until 4 months ago, I'm on 10 boards, right? And a lot of boards would say, oh, okay, we're going to have a Zoom call. Here's the call-in thing. But there was always the telephone number. I'm just going to use the call. I would never Zoom this thing, right? Well, now I'm realizing, I think a lot of boards that meet 4 or 5 times a year, they may still get together once or twice. Let's face it, just like when you guys get together for lunch, there's a certain camaraderie. But boards, are you going to get together 5 times a year and fly to Denver? I don't think so. I think you may do that half as often as you used to. Now, I think people are starting, my wife's starting to say, hey, you know what? I haven't done as much cooking as I've done. And actually, I like cooking. Well, guess what? I like saving money, so let's not eat out as much, right? So I think there's going to be some big changes in how people do things. And I think we're going to get a lot more practice, Marshall, because I'm an optimist. I really am an optimist, but I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that things are going to get back to normal in the next month or two. I don't think we've really thought this through. Remember I said you got to keep this simple, Wes. You got to keep this simple. Well, it's sort of interesting to me that, oh my goodness, this curve is flattened. It's flattened. It's getting better. Well, of course it is, because nobody's together, okay? And whenever they say, okay, we can go back to work, well, what does that actually mean, okay? Are you going to let people go into work that haven't been tested? And how often do you have to test them? And they'll say, oh, things are going to get back to normal. I'll give you a good example, Marshall. I have 10 of my classmates from Kellogg, 10 of my classmates from 40 years ago. We have season tickets to the Cup, so we each get 8 games, right? Because there's 80 games. Well, I said to myself, if they open this up, am I going to be in Wrigley Field with 40,000 people in July or August? I don't think so. Are you going to go to Maggiano's with 100? I don't think so. So when people talk about we're getting back to normal, I think this is going to take a while, all right? And until the testing is there, until we actually know is somebody immune or not, all this discussion of, well, it's going to be better by Easter, it's going to be better by, what are we talking about? We got a long roll ahead of us, but we will get through it. There's no question we'll get through with it, but it's gonna take some time. I'm convinced. That's my opinion.
Harry, I can't express to you how much we appreciate you doing this. It's been a wonderful experience, and to begin our regular meetings with this kind of energy and thoughtfulness is extremely gratifying for us as the Rotary Club of Chicago. We really, really appreciate your time and your insights. And so normally we would be standing at the podium together, and I would be handing you the gift that we give to our speakers. And in the absence of that, all I can do is show you what it is. Which is it's a candle holder, a votive, that we had made by an organization here in Chicago called Ignite, which teaches children of limited economic means how to blow glass. And we had a set made in the Rotary colors, and we're giving them to all of our speakers this year.
Wow.
To remind them that for Rotarians, service ignites our souls. So we will send you one of these. And the only thing that I would ask of you, and I know it's a big ask, but when we do get back to normal and when you're comfortable attending one of our in-person meetings, I'd ask that you come back to our club and speak to us in person because we really could go on and on today. We really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you again.
Well, great. And Marshall, I appreciate that. And it's really been an honor to be with you folks. And I've always respected Rotary. You guys do a lot of fantastic work because I think this is an institution that does have strong values, cares, and really wants to make a difference. In fact, Marshall, I often tease my students. We talk about all the issues in the world, right? We talk about global poverty, global healthcare, digital divide, the environment. And often I'll say to folks, well, who's going to take care of all these things, right? Because there seems to be, Marshall, this magical group of people somewhere called those guys, some men or women somewhere. And we say, wait a minute, we are those guys. And I think Rotary is a great example where you folks say, we can either talk about it or watch somebody else, or we can say, we will do something. So I admire what you guys do, and I hope everybody stays safe, and I'll pray for all of you and your families, and hopefully we'll get together live sometime. And I wish you all the best. And I'm actually getting on another Zoom call now. So you guys take good care.
Yeah, take care, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that went on a little bit longer than I expected. I would like to maintain a few other traditions and still get you out of here at a reasonable time. But we appear to have several visiting Rotarians or people visiting from elsewhere. So I'd like to start, kind of do this a little bit in reverse. If there's someone on the call who's a visiting international Rotarian, if you could unmute yourself and either by pressing the space bar or clicking the unmute button in the upper right-hand corner of your video, and let us know where you're from. If you're a member of Rotary Club, which Rotary Club, and how you found out about the call today.
Hi, hi. My name is Celia Shiai from Argentina. I was listening to the great speaker that you have today, President, and I am delighted to have had this opportunity to join you and to learn a lot from the speaker and from this virtual meeting. Take care and remember, Rotary connects the world.
Thank you,
Hi.
Celia, so much.
May
Hi.
I say something? I'd like you to know who Celia J.I. is. Celia was Vice President of Rotary International, and she is Rotarian for over 50 years from Buenos Aires, one of the most active Rotarians in all of Latin America. And it is an honor, Celia, that you have attended our meeting. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Marga. Thank you.
Yeah. Bernard, I know you need to go. Oh, Carlos, why don't we start with
Yes.
Carlos?
Congratulations for this excellent meeting. I'm proud to be part of this great organization. I am from Rosario, Argentina, and I am at home as everybody. And I believe that Zoom is a great opportunity to meet Rotarians in that difficult circumstances. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this meeting.
Well, thank you for coming, and we look forward to when you can visit us in person in Chicago.
Okay. In the future, maybe.
Yes. Bernard, I know you...
Yes, I had to drop out for a few seconds in between, but now I'm back. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to join your meeting. As I had written in the comments, I already participated in person in one of your meetings about 3 years ago when I was in Chicago with my family, and I just had the opportunity of meeting some of you people at Union Club, and I enjoyed it. And now, well, I'm at work. I'm in my office right now. We can still leave our home in Cologne, Germany, to still go to work. So we do call it. We should not have contacts, but we are still allowed to leave home. And I'm working part-time from home and part-time from the office. And today is an office day, even though it's 8 o'clock in the evening, but we have some important things to do. No, it's great to have these online meetings around the world, and I saw it as I'm still on your mailing list that you have an online meeting, and I thought it's a great opportunity to join it. We try to do the same with my local Rotary Club, Cologne Castel. We have about 30 people joining our online meetings. We have not yet been able to have a speaker. We are trying our very best, but within our club we have a member of the German Parliament who always gives us some insights what's happening in Berlin. And we have a minister from the local government of North Rhine-Westphalia also in our club. And they are both joining our calls and are giving some insights on what's going on. And well, once again, great opportunity. And by the way, great speaker. I've really enjoyed listening to Harry, and there are some very interesting thoughts I will take with me, and I will also tell my club when we have our online meeting tomorrow evening.
Well, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for the kind words. I know we have someone here from Lithuania. Victoria, are you still here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can see my video. For some reason, I'm not putting it on, but I truly enjoyed this experience. I'm following your club. As you know, we are from Lituanica International Rotary Club, the newest in our district, which I will have the pleasure to be governor of starting the 1st of July. So I follow your news on Facebook. I noticed this invitation and joined. Last Tuesday, I also registered, but just missed it. So the speaker was truly fantastic. I truly enjoyed it. We also run virtual meetings. Last Tuesday, we also had a guest speaker, very prominent author who was based in Canada. So this experience is really great. I love to see you all. Next time I will make sure my video works.
Oh, thank you. It's good to see you. I think we have a few other foreign
Hello, everyone.
visitors. Paolo?
Hello, this is Paola Garcia. I'm from Rotary Club Salto, District 4945. I'm in the same district as Carlos. And it was a pleasure to visit your meeting, and the speaker was really, really great. So I think that maybe in the future we can visit or share some things. I took some notes to share with with the other members of my club. So tomorrow night, I'm going to share what the speaker said that I found really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have others, other international or other guests joining us today? Just unmute yourself and let us know.
Yes, my name is Guillermo Castillo. I am from Guatemala. I think I am the only invited person here who is not a Rotary member. But I have done a lot of work with Rotary here in Guatemala, as well as with Rotary. I met Marga and John, I think it was 14 years ago. We have been friends for quite some time. And last night, talking to Marga, I was telling her that I have been following Harry for quite some time. I have some videos of him. And there is another one that, that it was a webinar 2 weeks ago at Kellogg. And he covered some of these topics. I think that would be helpful for all of you if you want to share that with other members in your groups or clubs or anything. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Well, thank you very much. We yesterday, the president of Rotary International, Mark Maloney, spoke to our district, and he commented on how closely people in Guatemala work with Rotarians. And our international committee is looking forward to building some relationships that will allow us to work on the ground in Guatemala. And now we have one of our most distinguished members and a past president, Andrea.
Yeah, hi friends. It's unfortunate that you guys cannot meet in person right now, but I think that's very fortunate to me that I can participate in your meetings and at least see you here on video and yeah, be a little closer to you and also participate and be able to listen to these fantastic speakers that we have, and especially the presenter from today. Harry made great comments, especially to these very trying times. Well, thanks so much that I was able to join you today.
Well, thank you for joining us. So we have 2 people from Germany, so that's great stuff. Andrea, could you tell us a little bit about what it's like in your region of Germany?
Well, I'm here in the northern part of Germany and also a rural area. I mean, when we go out here for walks, we don't have to be afraid to get too close to other people. And I mean, going out for walks on a daily basis is just what we do. And also going to the grocery store is almost as it normally is. I mean, they regulate a little bit the entrance by controlling how many carts go in. And normally I go almost daily or every other day to the grocery store, as I did in the past, and have my little shopping basket, and because I don't buy that much. And so it is probably much more relaxed than in the United States, especially as I hear from my kids in New York, it's totally different. And here it's, I mean, everybody or a lot of people are also working from home. So that is similar to the United States, but otherwise, especially as I said here in the northern part, the hospitals are open. There are plenty of beds. If somebody gets sick and needs to go to the hospital, they postpone a lot of procedures, but that was not necessary, similar to the United States. But with that, they're very well prepared here to handle if there is something major coming. But then again, the curve is flattening here very much already. And so I think within the next few days, they will opening things and slowly, I mean, we will not get back to normal, but we are opening things from the restrictions we have right now.
And I trust your kids are well in New York.
Yes, my daughter is already for 4 weeks in Maine. Her father has a house there, and she does home office from there, but works very hard, 10 hours a day, because she feels, well, if I sit in front of my boss's office, the boss can see what I'm working, but since far away, I have to produce more. And my son is in Manhattan and not quite as happy there. And he said there are homeless people walking in the streets and mentally disturbed people walking in the middle of the street. The picture is not as pleasant as, I think Chicago probably has it a little better under control too.
Well, give them our best, and you'll be interested to know that Nellie's Safe Haven just was named COVID positive, or she opened a COVID positive shelter for the homeless. So the homeless is definitely, they're definitely on our mind here. So thank you very much. Have we missed anyone else? Going through the list, it looks like everyone's introduced themselves. I want to just have a few short announcements and I can send everyone on their way, unless we have other guests who would like to introduce themselves. Going once, going twice.
If you allow me, in the chat, I posted the link to the webinar with Harry Kraemer 2 weeks ago, if anyone is interested.
Yeah, oh, here it is. Yep, we got it. Kellogg, Northwestern. Yes, thank you so much. We are recording this, and we can save the group chat. So if Shelby and Karen, if you could make sure that we circulate that link to everyone who attended the meeting, it would be great. So just a couple very, very quick announcements. Obviously, we're continuing with our Meals to the Front Line. You're going to be hearing more about that because we are looking at expanding that and maybe even doing some additional fundraising and attracting some additional money. The meals go for $5 a piece, and the response has really been extraordinary. People are very, very appreciative. We're going to continue bringing back more and more of our meetings. I really appreciate everyone's attendance today. This meeting, I think, has been very successful, and we were very fortunate to have such a thoughtful speaker. We've got some good speakers in the pipeline. In 2 weeks, we're going to hear from the assistant or from the Cook County State's Attorney, and we're also looking to put together some other programs, hopefully of this same caliber. So thank you all very much for attending. If you have any comments or thoughts about how we can make these meetings better and what would be appealing to you, please email me and let me know so that we can we can make the meetings even better. Thank you again, and with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.